Thanks for tuning in. I'm Andy Zopp, and this is Chicago Newsroom 2.0. At the roundtable this week, journalists Hugo Balta, Francia, Garcia, Hernandez, along with City Bureau's Morgan Malone, join me to discuss the continuing budget crisis at City Hall and what's next now that the mayor has been forced to beg off closing the gaping budget gap with property tax increases. We'll get started on the other side of a short break. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Bianca Cotton. Join me Mondays at 7 p.m. for Behind the Confident Smile as I sit in conversation with incredible, dynamic, and complex Chicagoans who peel back the layers, living lessons, the joy, and the pain behind their confident smiles. You can watch on CanTV 19, cantv.org, and CanTV Plus app.
Mayor Brandon Johnson can't seem to catch a break as of late. The City Council voted unanimously to reject his proposed $300 million property tax increase. The voters made clear they aren't fully on board with his desire for singular ownership of the Chicago Board of Education. And yet another family of a slain CPD officer insisted that Johnson not attend the funeral services. Is the mayor just having a rough patch, or is he on an express train to a one-term tenure? To unpack and opine on it all, I'm joined by an incredible group of thought partners. The Executive Director of City Bureau, Morgan Malone, publisher of Latino News Network, Hugo Balta, and Block Club Chicago reporter, Francia Garcia Hernandez. Morgan, Hugo, Francia, welcome. Let's start with the budget. So it was 50-0. We haven't seen a 50-0 vote, I think, in quite a while on the tax increase. So was the City Council trying to send the mayor a message, Hugo?
Well, very quickly, right? I think the message was we're in control. They certainly can smell blood in the water. We have a mayor that just doesn't seem to be able to catch a break. And with the proposal of a $300 million property tax hike that he said afterwards was just to send a message, what type of message was he trying to send? That he has no relationship with the City Council? I think if that is true, it was certainly not taken that way. And I think he still continues to struggle to collaborate in working towards arm wrestling towards a budget that can be approved.
Yep. Morgan, I know you have a lot of reporters who are close to City Hall. What are you hearing in terms of what was going on there?
So much of what we're hearing is that this is truly how what democracy looks like in practice. You know, I think in previous administrations, there was a lot of going with whatever the mayor wanted to do. We're just not seeing that in this administration, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it's actually healthy for everyone to be firmly rooted in having to represent their ward. We know that people across Chicago can't bear the weight of more property taxes right now, and I think everyone showed up to represent their community. And so it's not a rubber stamp, and I think that's honestly the best of Chicago. A lot of people would ask questions about this administration, but when we are questioning the mayor, that is the best of democracy, and it is the best of what Chicago has to offer.
Right, it's a great point. It does sometimes seem a tad inefficient. And speaking of inefficiencies, I think some of the things we heard after or leading up to the vote was that there hadn't been a lot of discussion with the aldermen or inclusion of the aldermen. Have you heard that, Francia?
Yes, I think that's one of the messages that we've been hearing, and what stood out is that some of the closest allies of the mayor were speaking out against that lack of collaboration, lack of negotiation. I think budgets are a discussion item, right? There is a back and forth. There is an evaluation of what could be improved, what services, if any, can be cut. And it doesn't sound from what many older people said that happened before this proposal came up. So that doesn't really help the discussion, and that could have been one of the reasons why it was such a contended message of, no, we are going to talk about this and negotiate. We're not just going to approve these budgets.
But soon after, they came up with a $150 million idea to cut that in half. So something was happening behind the scenes, which once again goes back to, yes, government should be working collaboratively. You should have the city council pulling for their wards, but then come out of the gate with something realistic, right? Probably more closer to 150 million than 300 million dollars, because then that dilutes some of the collaboration that needs to happen in government.
I mean, do you think that City Hall, the mayor and his team are getting a little bit of the message? You know, you need to be more inclusive with us, and we will work with you. Right?
I have been hearing that a lot around collaboration, and then also just like a desire from aldermen around progressive revenue. A lot of folks are looking for progressive revenue, but I think we need to be very honest about where we are, especially related to our budget. We are going to be facing budget shortfalls. The ARPA money is going to run out. The CARES Act money is going to run out. We're going to have fiscal cliffs in all of our major departments. We already have deficits. And we're going into an administration where we know we don't have Washington. Right. We're not going to get the same funds. And so whether it's going to be property taxes later on or now, we still need a comprehensive package that's both property taxes and progressive revenue to solve this, because we are about to face real hardship over the next 4 years with this budget, no matter what.
Right. And another area where he's facing some pushback, the mayor, is on the CPD budget, right, on the consent decree. I saw that Attorney General Raul had said, you know, if you don't fund, and it just makes sense, right? If you don't fund meeting the requirements of the consent decree, you could be held in contempt. Now, Francia, is that something that should be a priority, you think, for the mayor?
I think for the city of Chicago, for residents who have been so concerned and so affected by violence, both from people who commit acts of violence and from police officers who have done the same, it is very important. It's also something that Mayor Brandon Johnson ran on, right? He was very adamant about his attitude toward police reform and making real changes, but if there's no money behind that, then it's going to be really hard. We've also seen pushback from police officers who are not feeling appreciated or welcome in the job. And when police morale is down, that also has an impact in the way they police our communities, our neighborhoods, especially communities that have been very affected by policing. So that has to be a priority. And I know it's something that some who are more progressive think should be slashed, but the reality is the CPD is there, it's there to serve. And they need money to make the reforms that would make it a better police department.
Right.
And some of the questions that are happening is the consent decree actually working? I think I read an article from the Sun-Times that's 7% effective, that the mayor says he doesn't really need the decree because he himself is handling reforms. And then they're looking as far as tightening their belts, not hiring for open positions, and actually eliminating positions both for officers and for civilians. So you're right, in an area where we need to be leaning in on to continue to develop relationships between law enforcement and community, is that really where you want to go to find your cuts, your way towards profitability? I think not.
And I've been hearing a lot about cuts. And I think that people have to be cognizant that Chicago's departments are 2 to 4 times smaller than every other counterpart in every other major city in the country. Yeah. We're already too small. We already have 2 people working on major things for 250 square miles. So like, this is a very lean skeleton crew in all the departments, and people just don't get to see the internal workings to see that. The idea that we're just gonna cut, when you cut, even if it's CPD, the likelihood that you ever get those vacancies back, the likelihood that you ever scale back up to where you were, we've seen over the last 15 years, we're still not even close to the levels of staffing we were at when Mayor Daley was in office. So like, cutting now, we may never see even getting back to this level in another 10 or 15 years if we cut now.
Right. Well, I think, Morgan, you talked about finding different pathways for revenue. I think that's obviously going to be important, but a real challenge for the city. And a challenge for the school district, which has also been already some issues coming up with the appointed school board trying to make some major decisions. There were some issues this week with the charter school. Francia, are you familiar with that, the Acero Charter School issue?
Yes, absolutely. Acero Schools is a charter network that has about 13 schools in Chicago, and they announced plans to close 7 of these schools, a majority of them on the southwest side. Many of them serve families with children who have like special need education, as parents have told me, and they were devastated by the news, felt blindsided, and then were in a rush to enroll their children into a new school. Acero only has 200 to 300 seats available for next school year, and 2,000 students would be impacted by the closure. So there is a gap there. CPS has pushed their deadline to enroll kids, but it's still an ongoing challenge, and it has been a major source of contention now between Pedro Martinez and the newly appointed board, and parents and CTU, who are all demanding answers, a plan, and that the closures be stopped.
Right, and the newly elected board members who aren't seated yet are putting some pressure on to not act. Does that make sense for the current board just to stand down, or should they wait till January? I mean,
the current board still has a responsibility to taxpayers until they are out of office. They're in the job, so they can't just stop work. I do think that thinking critically about the large-scale decisions and whether or not they need to be made right now or they can be made with the new school board makes a ton of sense. But I am concerned about just not addressing issues in the near term versus waiting.
Yeah, they need to prioritize what they have on their laundry list of things that they need to take care of right now, and other things that they can wait till January. I think the latest with the charter schools has been positioned as yet again to try to strong arm CEO Martinez to resign, or for the board to fire him. But they have very well said that can wait till January, till you have a full board. And I think good on them. Many of them handpicked by the mayor, who we know has asked Martinez to resign. Good on them to say that can wait till January. Other things cannot.
Yeah, on the one hand, you think, well, yeah, there's going to be a whole new board in January. Maybe we should wait. But I think both your points are well taken. The schools are sitting every day, right? Issues come up all the time, which is why they meet every month. They can't just sit there and twiddle their thumbs while they're waiting for new members. But it does raise an issue. This is one of the challenges I've always seen with the elected school board. The challenges you're going to see between, with 21 members. I mean, do you think they're going to be able to be effective, Francia?
I think it's a question that remains to be seen. I know a lot of the elected officials are also it's the first time they're in office, so there's a lot of learning and catching up to do. CPS is a massive district as well. They have a lot of guidelines, they have federal funding, they have state funding. There's a lot of compliance, so there is a lot that they need to catch up on. I hope, for the sake of our schools, that they will find a way to collaborate effectively, especially with potential changes in federal funding for education, considering the budget shortfall in CPS projected for the years to come. There is a lot of work that needs to happen, and I would hope that all candidates, regardless of whether they were supported by CTU, by charter schools, or were independent, are catching up on the things that need to be prioritized and get ready to act.
I fully agree. I hope that people are in School Board 101 right now and focused on transitioning. Because, this is, I mentioned this before, when it comes to the elected school board, there was no clarity on what is the job description of an elected school board member, what's the core competencies, the qualifications, and what types of things are you deciding on. Now we have a partially elected school board coming on board with a president who is saying he's going to cut the Department of Education. So you're going to have real fiscal issues, but people weren't voting with who's going to be able to balance the CPS budget in mind and who's going to be able to respond to this political climate. And so now we have real challenges and an even stronger fiscal cliff, an even bigger fiscal cliff. And I don't know that we have the elected school board that can be responsive to that or tackle that without hiring a bunch of consultants. I don't know if we have the folks that can make that decision.
I think it's less, because if you look at the resumes of a lot of the newly electeds, I actually was overall pretty impressed, right? I thought we had got a pretty good group, but I think your point about CPS board member 101 is the issue, because even if you're experienced, and I think there's several teachers and people who've worked in the system, that's great, but that's being in the system and managing the system are two different questions. Not to mention some of the procurement issues. So I agree.
Look, whenever you have a board that's more than one, it's going to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
21, 50, or 50 city council members. But you're right. That's the democratic process, and we have to trust it.
Right.
And we have to see that everybody pulling together, we can come, I think, with come together and resolve the issues. I think the problem is when people think there's a turnkey, that something that works in one ward will work in the other, one school district will work in the other. That's when we have problems. But I think we have to trust the process and hope that these experienced people can make the right decisions.
Right, and compromise, right? Because you're right, what one works in one of their districts might not work in another, but then you've got to hear each other and say, okay, much like the city council working with the mayor, we're going to have to come together to reach agreement on things that might be hard to reach agreement on. And as usual, on these very important topics, it feels like time has just flown by. We are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming and for your insights on these critical issues. How we're going to fund our city, how our school board should think about working together. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate all of you being here. We'll be right back with this week's One-on-One featuring the Executive Director of the Jazz Institute of Chicago, Heather Ireland Robinson. Stay with us.
I'm Sean Cattouse. Welcome to The Compassionate Competitor. Each episode will explore the mental, physical, and emotional toll, as well as the rewards that come along with high-performance athletics. Join the conversation on CAN TV Cable Channel 19, stream live on cantv.org, or on the new CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
Since its founding in 1969, the Jazz Institute of Chicago has been committed to promoting and nurturing jazz in Chicago. The organization achieves its mission to keep jazz music thriving and expanding by celebrating the work of musicians past, shining a light on musicians present, and making the way brighter for musicians of the future. 90% of the myriad community and education programs implemented by the Jazz Institute of Chicago are free. To share more about the incredible work happening at the Jazz Institute, I'm joined by the organization's executive director, Heather Ireland Robinson. Heather, welcome to the newsroom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So excited to hear about your work. So tell my listeners and watchers about what you're doing over there at the Jazz Institute. I gave a good promo, but fill in the color.
Sure. And so we celebrated 55 years this year of nurturing and promoting jazz in Chicago. That includes programming the Chicago Jazz Fest. So if you've been down to Millennium Park, and really starting the Jazz Fest in the late 70s. That was a part of what the Jazz Institute's board did and just kept it going. We have a robust slate of education programs, really investing in the future of jazz, making sure that it thrives. Free programs in the parks. You can see world-class jazz musicians because of our 25-year partnership with the Chicago Park District. Wow. So just a few of the things.
Just a few, and so much of what you're doing free. Tell us a little bit about. There's a deep connection between Chicago and jazz, right?
Right. So I like to say jazz was born in New Orleans, grew up in Chicago, and was spread with the world, to the world. That's actually what UNESCO says about it, because it came to Chicago from New Orleans up the Mississippi River and really found a different sound here with Louis Armstrong and his contemporaries, where they were playing differently, and that sound just spread. So there are roots here. I mean, you can see Louis Armstrong's home in Bronzeville. Oh, wow. The Stroll, 47th and King Drive and Cottage Grove, where all those clubs were places that our grandparents hung out and had fun, but where real music was happening and art was being created, and that sound just took hold and spread everywhere.
And how do you do a lot of education kind of work? work. So tell us a little bit about, educating young people in particular about jazz and why it matters.
Right, and it takes a special kid, right, to want to play jazz with all the other kind of music that's going on.
Especially now, right?
Especially now. So we have a Jazz Links Student Council.
Wow.
So if you're a jazz musician in high school, you can come down to our offices in the Fine Arts Building once a month and meet other cats and kittens, as I like to say. So you can hang out and really build community with other young musicians. Those young people go to the CSO. They get workshops, they get to meet musicians, and again, be in community with each other. One program that I really like is our Jazz Masters Residency program, where we partner a jazz musician to go into a school band. So you're getting staff development from a teacher that may know music, but may not know jazz. As well, they get to work together, build curriculum, and have programs. We also have a jam session once a month at the Historic Jazz Showcase.
Oh, wow.
So we're not teaching you a 1 and a 2, but you're on a stage with world-class musicians that play, professional musicians, and you're learning. We take kids from age 9 to 19, and it's a hang, y'all. You can come to the Jazz Showcase. The bar is there, there's food around the corner, but you're literally hearing tomorrow's stars today.
Right. And how did you end up at the jazz? Do you have a personal love and connection to jazz?
I do. I grew up with jazz. My dad was a jazz head. It was absolutely the soundtrack of our lives. I mean, when we were little, we could name musicians. And my father would say, I'll give you, it was a quarter at the time. Now I give my kids $1. But I'll give you a quarter if you can name the musician, right? And I just had a life of arts management. I studied theater. And when I finished theater school at beautiful DePaul here in Chicago, I thought, as much as I want to be on stage, and I will be, I really wanted to give musicians the opportunity to play and to give kids the chance to learn how to play. I didn't grow up in a world in the 70s where they said, yes, be an artist, Heather. Yes, we weren't encouraged to do those kinds of things. So to be able to give those opportunities to young people and to be able to do that for musicians is just really my belief and my philosophy.
Yeah, and it's exciting to me. My dad was a jazz head too, so in fact,
swap stories,
I still
sure.
have all of his jazz albums, LPs, so that he collected, which are incredible. So I have a real good use for that. But what I love, what I'm excited about, and excited about what you do, is that there are a lot of young people still connecting to jazz. I have a friend that I work with, and I don't know where he went, but he went somewhere to a concert, and he came back. He goes, I saw the most amazing woman. It was Samara Joy, and he was raving about her. And then I saw her. I can't remember where I was, but she was at your fundraiser this year.
She played
right?
our galas.
Yes.
So we usually, our galas, we just do gala content, paddle raise, we may play a little music, and we thought, why not attract the nation's musicians to Chicago? And it started with Kurt Elling. Kurt Elling is a dear friend of the Jazz Institute, Chicago born and bred. So our first gala where we were kind of changing things, we had Kurt Elling. So we have something up our sleeves for May. I can't say yet, but I think everybody will be thrilled.
Right. Well, she's incredible up and comer and 23 years old, right?
23 years old. So to see her growth and to see the opportunities that she was given, she comes from a musical family, but the talent and the maturity, even her comportment, I'm thinking this kid is coming to Chicago by herself to do a show. Perfect, I almost said perfectly behaved, but she's just an elegant, amazing, creative kid.
It's a professional, right? At at 23, which is really incredible.
And that's important. It's one thing to have the talent, and that is a lot of what Jazz Institute programs do. Everything you need to get you to the stage. What does it mean to have your own band, to develop your own voice, and to travel by yourself sometimes?
Yeah, I think that that's a really important part. But I also think the other part is really, I'm a big lover of history, so I love that connection to the city and growing and innovating for the future, but also recognizing the deep past that jazz has and the importance of what it does. I think is so critical in what you do.
And we don't want to forget that. I always say it's American history. It's Black history. It's the history of the world when you look at why jazz came to Chicago and what it's meant. I mean, to the civil rights movement and the things that are happening now, you can really trace history, and jazz was there.
Right, exactly.
Jazz was there.
So, doing so much important work at the Jazz Institute, how can our viewers learn more about what you're doing and find out more about you?
We're across all social media platforms. Our website is jazzinstitute.org. jazzinchicago.org. Got
Nice.
membership information, programs that are coming up. So jazzinchicago.org.
Oh, terrific. Thank you for coming. It's so
Yeah.
nice to see you. And
Thanks for
so
having me.
thrilled
Thanks
for
for this
what you're
platform.
doing. Oh, terrific.
Thanks.
I'll be right back with a very special treat for you on the other side of the short break. Stay with us.
I'm Darius Hillman, inviting you to join me for Chicago Noir, the news magazine that highlights and showcases the African American experience in the Windy City. Tune in each month on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
This is usually the time that I share a few final thoughts with you, but tonight, Heather and I thought you might appreciate a very special performance, because in times like these, nothing heals the heart like some good music. Jazz music, to be precise. Taking the stage to perform live is Dakari Barclay, a trumpet player and educator based in Chicago, Illinois. A graduate of Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, where he formerly studied mathematics and economics, Dakari also studied jazz trumpet under both Melvin Jones and Gordon Verniche. Dakari, the stage is yours. That's our time. Thank you for tuning into Chicago Newsroom 2.0. Until next time, be well and well informed.